Time now for Back Pages tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. Joining me tonight, ESPN's Mark Ogden and the Sun's Charlie Wyett. Welcome along to you both. Let's quickly run you through some of the back pages. Well, the Times has the Olympics front and centre as the opening ceremony got underway. The build-up wasn't without its major concerns and security issues. We'll cover them. The Mirror also leads with the Olympics, but a big story. A lot of traction overnight. Harry Maguire and his Manchester United future. He also talks in depth about his injury problems last season, which saw him miss the Euros, and we'll talk in depth about Maguire shortly. Plus, England's cricketers have a nervy end to the first day of the third test against West Indies. Gus Atkinson shines. We'll be reflecting on that later in the show. Well, we're going to start with Harry Maguire, and we'll start with the Sun's back page. Charlie, I'll come to you. Your paper here, Harry on, is the headline. The sub-head, Maguire, I'll stay at United until told to go on. Resilience seems to have marked a lot of Harry Maguire's career, particularly at Manchester United. He's carrying on in that vein, it would seem.
I think he's behaved as you'd expect a Man United captain to behave. Obviously, he got stripped of the captaincy last year, but you know, both before and now, I think he's been really dignified. He's been committed to United, and I know he was close to leaving last summer to West Ham, but it was only because Erik ten Hag wasn't really that interested in keeping him. And the fact that he's just, put his head down, carried on and given absolutely everything. I think he deserves to have another season at United. He obviously will do because they need him, particularly bringing in the likes of Yoro, great talent, but still inexperienced. He's obviously had a very difficult few months with injury. But ultimately, I think he's proved, even last year when he made, 25 starts, I think a lot of that was due to United's injury problems. But I think he's proved that Ten Hag was wrong, really, to sort of be open to the fact that he could have left because, he's given absolutely everything. So, I've been impressed with him. And I think most Man United fans admire the way he's stuck at it because he's had a difficult few years at the club.
He has indeed. Mark, where do you think he stands at the moment in this United setup under Erik ten Hag? As Charlie mentioned there, it hasn't been easy for him under the manager. But right here and now, heading into the new season, where do you think the manager sees him?
Well, it's a difficult one because obviously you've got Raphael Varane left the club in the summer, Willy Camboire left in the summer, Victor Lindelof might leave as well. So they are running out of centre-half. So I think what will happen is it'll either Lindelof or Maguire who goes this summer because they're both out of contracts at the end of the season. So United will move one of them on because they need to bring the money in. They can't risk both going for nothing next summer. But I do think that Maguire is more likely to stay. Will he start? Well, obviously Lisandro Martinez is Ten Hag's favourite centre-half, but his injury record is pretty bad. It's worse than Maguire's last season. Martinez has had two bad injuries at United, so he can't rely on his fitness at this stage. Lenny Yoro, as Charlie said, he's still quite a young player. I think he's 18, so I think Maguire's got a chance. Obviously, Johnny Evans is still there as well. Maguire's got a chance, but I don't think that Ten Hag is totally convinced by him, so he's going to have to prove himself all over again. But I do think he's 31 now. He's going into the final year of his contract. It is a big year for him, but I do think that missing out of the Euros might actually do him a favour. He's probably had his first summer off for a long time. He's recharged his batteries. He's just gone away for a bit. And I think if he can start the season well, he's got a chance. But I do think that he knows that he's not Ten Hag's first choice. He might even be his second choice. So he may end up leaving before the end of the window, depending on what happens to Lindelof. But it is up in the air. But I think he's saying the right things. He wants to stay.
Yeah. Charlie, it seems that Maguire is in the headlines rather a lot. As you mentioned, former Man United captain. We saw him miss the Euros, miss the FA Cup final through injury, but he's always a big talking point. Do you think it could just do him a favour, as Mark alluded to there, if maybe the spotlight isn't on him heading into this season?
I mean, to a degree, that was the case last year, because, one point he was, fifth choice centre-back, wasn't he? He was out of the picture. And he was, insisting he'd continue fighting, and Ten Hag clearly didn't fancy him, but it was only because of the injuries and, some of the results that he sort of got his way back into the side. So he's had to be pretty strong mentally. And over the last couple of years, I mean, his first 2 years at Manchester United were pretty decent, weren't they? And then, his third season was difficult, and then everything went downhill for him, really. So, he's certainly not had it easy. I agree with Mark. He's clearly not Ten Hag's first choice centre-back. He's never going to be, is he, the way he's been treated? But I still think, he'll probably stay. United do have an extra year option on him as well, so they could trigger that. But I think at the moment he's more likely to stay.
Yeah, we've heard from Ten Hag over in the States saying that they're still looking to strengthen in all positions, Mark, which will, I'm sure, please United fans in this transfer window. 2 big signings already, including Lena Yoro, who we've touched on at centre-back. But the implication is then that they're not ruling out another centre-back coming in. We've obviously seen the links to Jared Branthwaite and, of course, we've seen the links to De Ligt as well. Do you think that we can expect them to make another move for a centre-back?
I think so, and I think the fact they are still looking at Branthwaite and De Ligt tells you that Ten Hag isn't convinced by Maguire. But beyond that, the people in charge of football operations at the club now don't want a player like Maguire to get to the end of his contract. They know that they could maybe get 15, 20 million from this summer, less for Lindelof. So that's why he's available, because they're looking to bring down the age of the squad, bring down the wage bill. So Maguire's a high earner. He's 31. If they can replace him with a Branthwaite or a De Ligt, who are both in their early 20s or mid 20s in De Ligt's case, then it's a good deal. So I do think that the Maguire thing will run probably until the end of the window, because he will get a club. Somebody will be interested in Harry Maguire, and I know there was a real interest from West Ham last summer, but it didn't come to fruition because I think the clubs are too far apart on the valuations. But United do need to overhaul that squad, because it's been 10 years now, 11 years since they won the league, and in those 11 years they've under-delivered every time. And I think there's a lot of players at the club that haven't performed, that have been there too long. And I think all areas of the squad are weak. Left back is weak because Luke Shaw can't be relied upon to be fit. Great when he plays, but he doesn't play often enough. Right back, Diogo Dalot is probably a reserve right back at best, but he's first choice because Darren Wan-Bissaka's not trusted to be a first choice starter. So they've got all the areas to strengthen, but it's whether they can do it. And a lot of those players that we just mentioned will probably leave, or they'll try to move them on, but it's hard to get 5, 6, 7, 8 players out of a club in one window. So they are looking to strengthen in all areas. They need a central midfielder. They need somebody to basically do what Casemiro should have done, but be 5 or 6 years younger than Casemiro. So they've got a lot of issues to address, and I don't think they'll get them all done this summer, but they are trying to do a lot of areas. And like I said at the outset, if Harry Maguire moves on to help fund that, that's what they'll do, because in many ways he is part of the old era. Yesterday's man, he was signed by Ogden and Solskjaer. He made me signed by Jose Mourinho. I can't remember there's that many managers that have been and gone. So it's time to look forward at United. I think any player that has got a year left in his contract knows they're vulnerable.
Yeah. What about, Charlie, do you think, for Maguire himself, what's the best scenario for him? Is it to stay at United, fight for his place, or with so much change with England, he's such a big part of Gareth Southgate's England side, if he's going to have a chance of getting into the new manager's regime, whoever that might be at international level, do you think he has to go elsewhere now?
No, I think if you got the chance, you stay at Man United. He's always felt like that. His view was, there's only one way down once you leave Manchester United, and providing he is playing, it may not be every game. I think his goal is the United States and Mexico and Canada in 2 years' time to play with England. Obviously, he was devastated that he missed out ahead of the last Euros. Suffered a setback ahead of the cup final, then suffered another setback while on England duty. He still felt that he would have been fit in time for maybe a semi-final. Although Mark Gay, he did do really well, I think England still were not as strong aerially, both up front and defensively. He'll certainly be part of the new manager's plans. That is for sure. So I think Maguire, he wants to stay at United if he can, play for England and play alongside John Stones. It's an experienced, partnership, those two. But as I've just said, Mark Gay will have something to think about that, because he was generally impressive. But I can see, at the moment, Maguire is determined to stay where he's happy because he loves it at Old Trafford. He loves the supporters. He's got a bond there. As I said, and while it's not been easy, I don't think he's looking for any other place. But of course, as Mark said, those situations can change. If a big offer came in and United looked at it, then all of a sudden he could be on his way. But certainly the player, I think, wants to stay.
OK, interesting times ahead this summer then. Now, let's stay with United, Mark, and I think it would have been too late to have reached any of the back pages, but we heard from Erik ten Hag, and he said he's 100% convinced that Marcus Rashford can get back to his best form, probably alluding to the form of 2 seasons ago, 30 goals compared to last season's 8 goals. So do you see it happening this season coming?
Erik ten Hag's got to say that, hasn't he? He's his manager. He has to say that he's 100% confident in the guy being back to his best. But I'm not sure about Marcus Rashford. He's got a lot to prove. He's 27 in October, so he's no longer the kid anymore. And I think he really needs to show it this season. He has to show that he is the guy that can be what he was 5, 6, 7 years ago. But I do think at times that Marcus Rashford's kind of plateaued a bit. I don't think he's kind of developed his game as he should have done. So is he able to go again? Is he able to be the player that we thought he was? Or does he look around and think that this place isn't for him? He's got a long contract at United. He needs to justify that because there isn't really a queue of clubs waiting to take him away. But I don't think it's a given that he comes back to the player that we thought he was. I think, you're like saying he's in his mid-20s now. He should be at his peak and he's not there. So maybe he's one of those players that had his peak years when he was 22, 23. But I'm not sure. I think the jury's out on Marcus Rashford. I think he's got a lot of work to do to prove that he can be the player that he was because, yes, he had a great 3 months after the World Cup, but in 2022. But last season was terrible. The season before that was just as bad as this one. So he's really had 3 good months in 3 years. That isn't enough for a player like Marcus Rashford. So we need to see the best of him. I think next season is make or break for him.
Charlie, do you think it's the same for a player like Jadon Sancho? I mean, again, these are 2 players that are out of the England fold at the moment, but will very much be trying to get back into it under the new manager.
They're both frustrating players, aren't they? Because on their day, they're both brilliant, and that's their inconsistency. It is, I think, not just frustrating for Man United fans and Ten Hag, the manager, but also England and Gareth Southgate, and particularly Rashford, which is why he didn't make the last squad. Sancho's slightly different. There were obviously concerns about his attitude at times, and ultimately that's why he was returned back to Dortmund. But he's got a lot to prove, and he's really got to knuckle down. I think Rashford is just going to be one of these players. I think throughout his career he's going to have these incredible spells of form where he's really tearing it up, and then goes off for a couple of weeks or a couple of months. And I just think that's the type of player he is, unfortunately.
Mark, do you think the narrative has changed slightly at Manchester United with Erik ten Hag signing this new deal? 2 trophies in 2 seasons. It seems like there's more discussion about the players this summer as opposed to the management. So what do you think success looks like next season?
Well, I think the narrative has changed because, for once, United have got some deals done early. They've got some good deals done early. They've made transfer moves, and I think the fans are upbeat because they can see that Ineos have come in and made a change. They're getting players out, they're getting players in. And that has helped kind of take the focus away from Ten Hag because there was a lot of uncertainty over his future at the end of last season after the cup final. A good 2 weeks we were waiting to see whether he was going to stay or go. We can't forget that they finished, in a really bad position last year in the Premier League, minus goal difference. But I think in terms of the positivity that's around the club now, I think they have to be targeting the top 4. Now, I know it's not what Man United are about. They should be winning the league, but they're not ready to win the league yet. I think Erik ten Hag said that this week. They're still a year or 2 away, but the absolute minimum has to be has to finish in the top 4. Liverpool have got a season of transition under Arne Slot. Chelsea, we don't know what they're going to be. I think, City and Arsenal are probably going to be top 2, or certainly 2 of the top 3. And then after that, United should really be targeting top 4. And if they don't, then that is a real failure. So top 4 at the very least.
Do you agree, Charlie?
I think it's going to be tough for United. I think long term, under Ineos and Dan Ashworth, United will get it right and they will win the title again. But I think short term, under Ten Hag, I still think they're going to have a rocky start to the season.
OK, do you, just finally on this, Mark, do you think it's a little bit of a summer of change in terms of heading in a positive direction under Ineos? It seems that it's a different transfer window so far, but not just the transfers, the backroom staff side of things as well, Ruud van Nistelrooy, Dan Ashworth. Do you think this feels like United heading in the right direction now?
It does. It feels like the changes have been made. Now, I don't think it's as much the personnel. You know, they have made some changes, brought some key people in key positions, which is what they've been waiting for a long time. But I do think the big issue, the absolute number one issue that's changed is that the Glazers no longer control the football side, because they're the people that didn't really have a clue how to run a football club. You know, they had Sir Alex Ferguson ran it for them brilliantly. He left, and ever since then, they just didn't know what to do. They appointed the wrong people, and it's taken Ineos to come in and realise that the right people need to be put in the right position. So the biggest change is the Glazers taking their hands off the reins and leaving people who know what they're doing to do the job. So that's why it's a positive change. But like Charlie says, it's early days, and you know, nothing's been won yet. The season hasn't started, but progress is being made slowly.
Yeah, we'll see what those first couple of results give us when the new season is upon us. Right, gents, thank you very much for now. We'll take a quick break there. When we come back, we'll look at more of the back pages, including this in the Times: Olympics sabotaged as arsonists target the railway lines in a bid to disrupt the Games. You're watching Back Pages tonight, and welcome back to the Sun's Charlie Wyett and ESPN's Mark Ogden. Let's get to the Olympics, which is officially underway. But arson attacks on the train network caused huge disruption just hours before the Games' opening ceremony, which itself was heavily affected by rain, as you can see here. The Telegraph: reigning champions Tom Daley and Helen Glover are Team GB's flag bearers for the ceremony. Let's move on to the eye there, and you can see a brilliant picture of the pair of them with that Titanic-esque pose. So let's get to Charlie now and talk about this opening ceremony, Charlie, because it was always ambitious to attempt an opening ceremony outside, and Sod's Law would dictate that it rained for most of the time. What did you make of it?
I thought it was all right, and I've read and heard a lot of critics of it. I mean, it was ambitious, wasn't it? And it was spoiled by the rain. It's funny, isn't it, that I think we've had two huge events so far, and you know, we all moan about the English weather during the summer, but as Mark knows also, the amount of times that we were caught in some terrible downpours in Germany, just the same in Paris, and it just really started at the start. You know, of the ceremony as well. But it was, you know, it was ambitious. I still think it was the right thing to do, rather than just put it at the Stade de France like we'd normally have. Yep, so some of it worked, some of it didn't. I feel sorry for some of the athletes who are getting soaked. The Jamaicans and the Italian boat, that's my favourite one. They still seem to be having quite a good time. Yeah, but ultimately, yeah, the weather was pretty dreadful, and it probably went on half an hour longer than it should have done as well.
Yeah, I saw a wry smile from you, Mark, as I introduced that as well. But, I mean, it's all about really getting the ceremony done and moving on to what we all care about, and that's the sport, which really gets underway from the weekend.
Yeah, and that's why I kind of agree with Charlie's point about the athletes. You know, you've got athletes that have stood around for 3 hours in the rain. I mean, I really hope that no athlete's going to miss an event because they've got a cold, because they've been standing around getting soaked on a boat for 3 hours. But it did seem to go a little bit long, and I think it was great when, you know, it went dark and all the lights came on, but it just felt a little bit over the top. But, you know, you're right, the Olympics is, you remember it for the great moments on the track, you remember the legends that it creates, and, you know, Team GB's got a lot of medal hopes. You know, Catherine Johnson-Thompson, Adam Peaty. There's a real chance that they're going to bring back some medals. And in recent Olympics, certainly, you know, maybe even pre-London 2012, the British athletes have brought lots of gold medals back. So there's a lot of pressure on the current crop to do it again. But there are hopes, there are positive hopes, but they probably need better weather than today to perform to the best. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, weather aside, Charlie, to more serious matters, the arson attacks that we saw earlier in the day, huge disruptions across the train network, and something that obviously no one to do with the organisation of this huge event would wanted to have dealt with. We saw problems with the Eurostar as well, and with people wanting to travel over for the Games. But I'm interested to know how the newspaper goes about reporting on such a big event like the Olympics, particularly when we see matters like this unfold.
You know, obviously it affected a lot of people, hasn't it? It's obviously affected some of the athletes, but particularly, you know, the the families of the athletes and lots of the fans, and just France as a nation, to its disabled part of its rail network. Obviously, the security services feared something like this would happen. I think that's pretty obvious. But obviously, a lot of the attention was in and around Paris, and that's going to be the same the next couple of weeks, isn't it? 50,000 police and soldiers on duty, and because of what's happened today, I reckon they're going to be even more aware, if they weren't already, what could be around the corner. So, it's a big shame, but probably not totally unexpected that something like this happened.
Yeah. Charlie, I just want to stick with you as well. We saw a lot of stories about some of the food concerns as well around the village and what the athletes were being served up. Do you expect, as this progresses, that we get more into the sports side of things that will begin to take over?
Well, you'd like to, and obviously there were concerns amongst the British squad, and they went back to their areas, didn't they, to eat? And it's actually really serious. I think some people might think, well, moaning athletes, but in terms of their food, it's not like food for supporters or food for journalists at an event. Obviously an athlete needs to be eating the right stuff, proper food, not raw meat or anything like that, which is what we were reading about. So I'm actually really, really surprised, because that is surely one of the absolute basics for any Olympic Games, to make sure that the food to the athletes is of an adequate standard.
Yeah, absolutely. I did promise we'd touch on the cricket, Charlie, so we'll just come back with you. We've got about a minute remaining. We saw another good display from Gus Atkinson, 4 wickets against the West Indies after a 7-wicket haul and a 5-wicket haul at Lord's. Do you think he could be an heir apparent for Jimmy Anderson, perhaps?
Yeah, it's great timing, isn't it? 20 wickets, 5 innings, come at the right time. Incredible debut against the West Indies. Really good again today, 4 for 67. I thought they might change it up and maybe give Matthew Potts or Dylan Pennington a go in terms of the rookie seamers, but they've changed. Kept the side. And Chris Woke said today that he's making Test cricket look slightly easy, and certainly the last few weeks Atkinson has, and hopefully we'll see more of the same against Sri Lanka.